a first kiss, your first car, the unrequited first love. However, what does this mean in the grand scope of things? Are firsts more monumental because they are the first, or do we get better with practice? Do we remember our firsts as more important than they actually were, holding on to that magical moment as a mark of our past and future selves? Do our firsts outshine what comes next? On A First Time for Everything, we will explore with our guests their firsts and how those impacted the seconds, thirds, and even countless times after. Is the first the best or merely the beginning? Or worse, was the first the last because it was so bad? We will dig into the recesses of our memories and consider whether or not a first was the start of something amazing or something we'd rather not remember. Come along with me, Juliet Rose, as I put our guests in the hot seat to analyze their firsts and how they defined who they became. I promise you're in for a fun, although maybe bumpy ride. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to First Time for Everything, a GoIndieNow presentation. I'm your host, Juliet Rose, and tonight we are here with Dennis M. Myers, who is a science fiction writer. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're glad to have you on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and how people can find you?
Dennis M. Myers. People can find me at automatedempire.com or on Facebook, Instagram, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. I also hang out on Discord quite a bit. You can find my books on Amazon.com. Just search for Rise of the Automated Empire to find that first series.
Very good. And I'm just going to show a comment real quick, just a reminder for our listeners out there to send a star to our hosts and producers. Let us know how much you appreciate what we're doing here at GoIndieNow. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift card swag and more. So thank you for tuning in. Awesome. So like I said, this is going to be kind of a relaxed conversation. I'm going to ask you some random questions. Feel free to answer them. If you come across anything you're not comfortable with, just let me know. No big deal. We'll just move on to the next question. Okay. All right. So when was the first time you knew you wanted to pursue your dream of being a writer?
When I was 17 years old. By the time I was 17, I was already an avid reader. My grandmother gave me a book in 6th grade called The Star Beast. It's on the shelf behind me and it tattered. But I was reading things left and right. And at 17, my mother handed me a book by a very famous author. And I started reading it and I came across some things that just, I couldn't suspend my disbelief, and I'm 17, so I'm thinking this is a crappy book, and I look at it and realize that this author got paid money to do this, and I thought, well, I can do better than that.
I like that.
And so I've been thinking about it. Early on, I toyed with some ideas, and I started writing things down, and I've been writing notes and ideas since then, but also along the way, I found out a few important things, like how little authors make. When I found out that my favorite science fiction author as a child, Robert Heinlein, didn't make enough money to pay the bills with the science fiction. He was writing Harlequin romance to pay the bills. That made me get this idea in my head that I had to make money first before I could do my writing.
So you started at 17 and you said you felt like you had to make money first before you do writing. So how long was that before you actually said, no, I don't have to, I can just do it?
Well, I got laid off in 2017. And the severance package was based on age. And I'm like,
is that legal?
I'm old. So the severance package was big enough that I didn't have to go to work for like 4 months.
Nice. And
I have the most amazing wife who, when I told her that I was thinking about sitting down and doing one of these projects, because I had realized, if I don't start writing now, I never will.
Yep.
So she didn't bat an eye. She said, whatever, go ahead. And so I sat down. I actually made a random number thing to pick out which title to do. And the one that I picked out was this little short story I had worked on with this young woman on the moon. And the image that came to me was she was gracefully hopping down the hall because she's on the moon in low gravity, and how that looked and how she would move. And then I realized that the short story, well, back up a couple of years prior, I have a cousin who dared me to put all of my story ideas onto one timeline. And so when I looked at the story idea that got randomly popped up, it was right at this convergence between where the corporate federation and the ended and the automated empire started. And I realized this is my origin story. And
Okay.
so that's how Rise of the Automated Empire came about. And yeah, I've been writing ever since.
That's really awesome. Well, it's funny that you said the thing about money, because I'm my second marriage. And so my husband says to me about a friend of ours who's an author, he said, "How much money do you think she makes?" And I laughed and laughed. This was before I had started writing. And so now he's seen it firsthand. Everything I make basically gets invested back into what I'm doing. Because that's the only way to become successful. But I thought that was funny because, I think there's this mindset that writers make a ton of money, and for the most part, some do, but they're a pretty small percentage. Most of us are just doing this for the love of the craft. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got extremely lucky with my publisher, and he got some amazing covers. I mean, 3 out of 4 of the covers are covers that I love, and the second one isn't all that bad. But I would never have been able to get that just as a self-published, because I would never have found this artist.
Right.
I'm just hoping that the books sell enough copies to pay him back for what he's invested in me.
I think eventually they do. And that's the other side of it, is the patience side of like realizing that, you got to build your followership. You have to, continue to market and put yourself out there. And that's a little bit of a challenge at times, regardless of how we're published, whether we're published through a publisher or we're indie, we're still published. It doesn't really matter. Like, we're still really responsible for carrying a lot of that weight.
Yes.
Okay. How did you first set out to achieve your goal of being a writer? Once you knew for sure, so you're not 17 anymore, I want to do this. How did you set a plan in place?
Well, you mean right from in 2017 when I sat down to start writing?
Right. You're told your wife, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
What did you do to put that get the ball rolling, basically?
I sat down and I took the short story and I just started writing what happens next. I'm the kind of writer where the characters are in my head and they're doing the talking, so I'm just taking notes.
Yep.
And one of the things I learned early on was to track my numbers. I use a spreadsheet, and every day I put in the word count of the current works in progress. It's fairly wide spreadsheet now, but
yeah.
So every day, no matter which projects I'm working on, multiple projects, I have a total I can look at. How many words did I write today? And then the weekly totals. And then, I can see, am I going through a slump? Am I going through, hold myself accountable, not to beat myself up, but to be aware of what I can do. And also, you're looking at the totals that you got 0 in the day and you got 2 hours left. Come on, buckle down.
Yeah.
Help you motivate. 2,000 words later, you're satisfied with the day.
Yeah, I love that idea. I actually don't do that. I have a goal in mind, I want to write this amount of words a day. But I like the idea of that because it's almost like something that nags you a little bit, that says, hey, you haven't written today. You got to fill something in the blank. So that's actually a really good idea. I might have to steal that one from you.
Feel free. It's definitely helped me. The biggest help that it was to me was when I sold the books. I had the first 2 books written, and the third one was almost done. And what he told me was that he was interested in the story, but he wants 3 books. Okay. So I finished the first 3 books, and I knew there had to be the 4th. So I asked him when he would need the manuscript for the 4th book in order to put it on the same rollout, because he was doing rapid release every 5 weeks.
Sure.
And he gave me a date, And I looked at my numbers and I did the math, and I saw that I could easily make that date by just concentrating and doing what I had been doing, but only, doing it every day. And by meeting my numbers, I was done 2 weeks early.
Wow, that's impressive. I like that.
Yeah. So that was a big help, because otherwise I don't know if I would have known if I could have done it or not.
For sure. Yeah. I think having kind of like those deadlines, even if they're self-imposed deadlines, as long as you're really holding that accountable, does help really push through to get the work done. Because it's always easy to say, okay, let me do the dishes first. Let me walk the dog. Let me do something that will take precedence to writing. So it's really important to say writing comes first,
Yeah. Well, for me, like, let me do Facebook first. Let me do Instagram. Yeah, blue sky.
I could actually relate to that too. Yeah. So let's talk roadblocks, because I think a lot of people that are first starting out hit a lot of roadblocks. So what are some roadblocks that you hit when you decided this is what I want to do, and how did you overcome them?
Well, one of the first things that I did was get myself an actual editor. I hired an independent editor to help me out with my manuscript, because I knew this is my first book. I needed to go through, and she did a lot of developmental work with me to help me smooth out some things. And one of the big things she did, because it was planned as a trilogy, one of the big things she did is she pointed out in the first manuscript at the 60% mark, there was a major shift. All these plot lines were ending, and then they were moving to a new location. And she pointed out that this is the beginning of a second book. And that's how Precipice was born. And so the first book became 2, which opened it up for me to add in extra characters, which turned out to be like pivotal for the rest of the series. And it was, that was the big thing for me. And then it was getting it in front of people. The first book sat with Bain for a couple of years before I heard back, and they weren't interested. But I hired another editor, and we did a little bit more reworking, and I resubmitted it. And eventually I found Chris Kennedy Publications, and Chris was interested in the story. So we got it.
That's cool. So tell me a little bit about that first book. So you decided that you got laid off, or you got laid off, is that correct?
Yeah, I got laid off. I found work in plenty of time. I'm a software developer, and everybody needs software developers. So
when you got laid off in 2017, did you already have this story idea in your mind, or did you kind of sit down with a blank slate and think, okay, I'm going to be a writer, it's what I want to do, and then you came up with story idea?
I had the character of Dawn. I had the idea of the corporate federation, and I knew what kind of a-holes they were. And I knew the concept of the automated empire is one where most functions are automated, and I wanted to show it's kind of a twist. You know how the empire is the big evil thing? Well, is it evil? Which side are you on? It depends on the era. And there's an event that happens several hundred years down the line that I call the fully automated empire, which changes everything. And I wanted to show that. And over time, with this in the background, I want to build this empire and then change it and do things with it. So yeah, it's just stuff that's been growing in my head forever, like a fungus.
And so you had that first book thinking that it was going to be one big book, and then your editor said, like this is where you should do a second book, or?
I always knew this was going to be a trilogy.
Okay.
Because I wanted to introduce the situation, and part of that situation is that Luna, which is independent, becomes part of the corporate federation.
Okay.
The second book, which is Broken Trust in the grand scheme of things, but part of Precipice now too, that second bit of the situation is where they're not sure that was such a good idea. The people who wanted it and both sides, it's like, one person thought that having the moon would sway things in his way, but the moon doesn't make waves, it pulls the tide. So it's more of a more of a change than they were ready for, and eventually it's all out war by the end.
This actually sounds really fascinating. I'm going to have to look this up.
And I knew that the last book was going to be the war story. This was, and so in the first book, I introduced the Navy characters. In the second book, I introduced the Marines and stick with the Navy characters. And again, in the third book, I develop them and get them ready for the final battle. And then at the end, the Marines and the Navy are two of the main storylines in there. Okay. And then you have the politics too.
Sure. So when you put your first book out, you said these came out 5 weeks apart, each one?
Yeah, they were published 5 weeks apart starting in October of last year.
Wow. Okay. That's impressive. So when the first one came out and the other ones, because obviously they were close together, how were they received? And what have you done about marketing, or how are you handling marketing?
I've talked it up everywhere I go. I go on these broadcasts and shows. Hi.
Hi.
I haven't been able to get to any conventions since they came out because I got laid off in October again, which put me in kind of a financial crunch until just recently. I got a job and yay, making more money than ever now. So I'll catch up quickly, but I wasn't able to hit the early year conventions. I always knew I was going to do the April one because RavenCon is my home convention. It's in the same city I live in, Glen Ellyn, Virginia. And that's the one where I am on the finalist list for the Webster Award.
That's so awesome. Yes, so he's on the finalist list for the Webster Award, that's big. That's big. So yeah. Okay, let's see. All right, so it's pretty new, so this may not pertain to you, but we'll talk about it anyway. Have you received any negative reviews? And if you have, how have you handled that and adjusted to kind of moving forward from it?
Yes, I got a 2 out of 5 Goodreads review, followed by the booktuber who posted it doing a full-fledged 24-minute diatribe about how god-awful the novel was.
And how did you handle that?
Thank God that weekend, one of my best friends, who has also read the books and loves them, looked at the interview as well, and her response was just, he wasn't reading the book. He got this idea in his head that of a main core of the story, he just couldn't buy off on it. And because he couldn't get that, the rest of it just wouldn't fall into place and threw him off. So yeah, it's not a happy experience, but it's another review.
Right. That's exactly it. And that's the thing is authors, I think we all get negative reviews for whatever reason. Sometimes they're legitimate. And, you look at that review and you say to yourself, is this something I should pay attention to? Am I missing something? Did I create a gap? Whatever it is. Sometimes it's not. I have a horror novel and I had someone that gave me a bad review and then said at the end, I don't like horror. And I thought, well, I really can't help you then. Like I have to just move on from that. And I think that's what it is. As I said, well, it's a review, boost my numbers in the reviews, got to move on. Can't take it personally. Obviously this person doesn't like horror. So yeah, I think that's something a lot of first-time writers are definitely worried about. And I think every writer experiences. I don't know a writer out there who hasn't gotten blasted by somebody, and sometimes unfairly and sometimes legitimately. So I think you just have to assess.
I'm going to say that maybe I didn't explain the situation well enough, because basically the premise is that on Luna, everything's automated. The justice system is automated and all the rules are already in place. And it's been that way for over 1,000 years. The last time they had an assembly, which is basically the whole thing is run by a cooperative, and every person on Luna gets one share, and they live off the dividends of the share. But it's so much, and it's such a closed system that nobody really thinks about it. They just do what they want to do when they want to do it. And it's automated in the background. There are jokes about somebody that built the city and then ran out of air because he couldn't afford the air fees anymore. Things like that. But the last time there was an assembly was 80 years previously. 7 people get elected to solve a problem. They convened in the morning. They were done by lunch. And then they disbanded and they were done. 80 years later, there's another problem that the automated systems can't handle. So they do the same thing. And Dawn has gotten famous because of a meme, a viral meme. I'm sorry, but that is so today, right? and so she gets elected, and at the last minute, her girlfriend dumps a whole bunch of votes on top of her too. That's key, but that knocks her up to the point where she's prime minister, which is like the chairperson of the meeting. It's only because the antagonist decides he's going to try something that the fact that they're actually being handed a lot of power comes into play. Because then they exceed their mandate, and that has repercussions in later books as well.
Okay. And you mentioned, I'll bring this up because we talked about it before, that your books are diverse. You have a lot of representation in your books. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things that happens is Dawn meets a new girlfriend. She's got an uncle. And this is when I write, I include people I know. So Dawn is based on 3 women who are very key in my life. I mean, all 3 of them wear titles of best friends. One of them was a girlfriend even. 2 out of the 3 are in long-term relationships with other women.
Okay.
So when about the 3rd or 4th iteration, when I realized that Dawn was actually flirting in the beginning, and all the pieces just lined up that she likes women. There were like maybe 2 scenes that were added that just completed the whole thing and made that a really perfect arc. And then the other one was the uncle, Keegan. Keegan runs a restaurant. It is a wonderful little place. He does all sorts of different food, and his partner, Edo, does the bartending.
Nice.
Well, my great uncle Al rescued Edo from Cuba back when Castro took over, and this was one of the family secrets. That Uncle Al would show up, but he never brought his wife with him, because we were never told about that, and I didn't know Edo existed until I was an adult.
Wow.
And they had passed away. Both of them passed away before I knew the full story, and I just wanted to do something to kind of honor the 2 of them and their relationship the best I know it. So in the book, Edo is kind of Cuban, pencil thin mustache. He's the bartender, and then Keegan. It looks nothing like my Uncle Al. But his real name is the same name, Glenn Baker, right, which is my great uncle's name. And just for context, my great uncle Al was the little brother of Lynn Baker, who was the founder of Tonka Toys.
Nuh-uh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that. Well, we love representation here. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's really important in this day and age, and especially across different genres. We want to have representation that's natural and just not tropish. And it sounds like yours really are. And that's super cool.
Well, like I said, for me, I try to include characters based on people in my life. In my life, I have so many friends, and I know so many people. So yeah, I've got a bit of everybody in there.
That's really cool. All right. So here's a question. Who was the first person that really supported you other than yourself, or really kind of stood behind you? Tell me why that mattered to you and how they did that.
My wife. I started writing. I started doing my numbers. She would come in and bring me a snack. She would come in and just, how are you doing? I'm like, I've got 1,000 words and it's only noon. And she's like, oh, good for you. Just so supportive the whole time. No worries about money or anything like that, because I didn't let it get that far. And when I told her I wanted to spend some bucks, on an editor. She was, right there with me. She's been by my side the whole time, and I don't think I could have done this without her support. So yeah, my wife, May.
Way to go, May. Now, has May read your books?
No, she's Thai, so English is not her natural reading language. Yeah, so she hasn't really read them.
That's okay. My husband doesn't like some of the subjects I write about, so I'm in the same boat. But he's very supportive. He's like, it's just not my thing. I'm like, I understand. It's got to be your thing, more or less. He's read a few just to kind of give me feedback, but ultimately it's still like, I really don't care for this or that. I'm like, all right, Okay, when was the first time you felt like you were achieving your dream, and in what way? It's like a pivotal moment.
Well, I fell in at the conventions I was going to. I fell in with a group of people, starting with Jim Nettles and Patrick Dugan and Darren Kennedy, Stuart Jaffe, John Hartness, this whole crowd of people that are, when I told them I was working at being an author, they took me seriously, and they gave me advice, and they showed me things and welcomed me, and let me know that at the conventions, BarCon, after everybody goes home, at the bar, that's where authors and publishers sit down and talk. And that's, I started hanging out there and just learned so much.
Yeah, I know that group of people, and they are really supportive of other authors, which is super awesome. Okay. What was your first creation, and do you still feel proud of it? And would you go back and change anything? What would you change?
My first creation?
Yeah, so it can be a short story or your book or whatever. It doesn't have to necessarily be your first book that just came out.
In 1990, my first adventure for the Traveler role-playing game was published in Challenge magazine, and I got a check for $290, and I was super proud of that. And my name was on the cover. I got it on the wall over here, and then there's a copy hiding back behind there. And the sequel to that story was in 2 issues later. And in that issue was this author who had written a short story named Michael Stackpole. I don't know if you know Michael Stackpole or not, but he wrote I, Jedi and Rogue Squadron and little things like that.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. And
cool.
I mentioned that to him the other day, or a couple of years back when I ran into him. So that was interesting.
So would you change anything about that first publication?
No, that was wonderful. That was a really good way to, get in and get something done on a deadline and communicate with the publisher. I still I was on the phone talking to Mark Miller, who was running the whole thing at the time, because I wanted to basically, I don't know if you know the genre, but one of the major background characters was Duchess Margaret. And the storyline I wanted to do was add in, she was having twins, born at 8 o'clock and 8:12, just like my little kids had been.
Aw.
So see, I put my kids in there. And so I've been able to run around to Traveler people, say, hey, I got Margaret pregnant.
All right. Firsts are hard. Often we feel like the glitches and mistakes are a reflection of who we are rather than working out the kinks. What would you say was the hardest first you have ever done? Did you continue, and are you proud of yourself for taking the leap?
Oh, the hardest first I've ever done. Well, the hardest first was probably the first time I went to sea in the Navy after my kids were born, because the first few years of their life, I was on shore duty. So then I went back to sea duty. I had already split from the first wife. And so after being gone for several months, I came back and I was driving towards their house, and I see these 2 little kids playing. And they're taller and skinnier than my kids, but really white blonde hair. And I thought my kids are going to look like that in a couple of years. And I pull up and they ran up to me, and those are my kids. And that was basically the end of my Navy career, because I decided I was never going to do that again. I did have to go to sea again, but I got out as soon after that as I could.
Yeah. I was a military wife for my first marriage, so I know what it's like on the flip side of that, where you're home alone raising the kids and you really never see your husband. So yeah, and that's tough. Yeah, but good for you for making that decision and putting your family first, because it is really important. On the flip side, what is the funniest first you've ever had to do? Maybe it wasn't funny to begin with, but turned into it as you tried.
The funniest first?
Could be embarrassing, could be goofy. Like for me, I always say like my funniest first, even like this show, when I did it last week, like there was a lot of glitches, but we still did it. We laughed through it. We got through it because we didn't take it too seriously. So,
well, there was, in 2008, 2007, 2008, I met a Thai waitress here locally that I'd liked, took her on a date and thought, oh, I'm going to find some Thai women to give me advice on how to pursue this Thai waitress. And I got to talking to one of them, and we would talk every day, and I would see the waitress once a week. And after a few months, the waitress was like, I'm really not interested. It was, but I was having such a good time talking to this woman in Thailand that it was like, okay, whatever. And we kept on talking. And eventually, my kids had just turned 20. And, 20-year-olds don't want to go on vacation with dad anymore. Yeah. They got to the thing they got to be doing. My daughter was going to college in New York. My son was off doing other things. So my first vacation by myself, my first vacation overseas, I went to the other side of the planet. Wow. Other side of the planet, to meet a woman that I had only ever seen online. And I swear to you, I had judged her size by her doorway. So I thought she was a little bit taller than me and kind of oddly shaped, but she made me laugh. I thought the worst thing that could happen is we're just going to be good friends. And now I was fine with that. That was great. I got there, and this little woman comes and just latches on to me, gives me a big hug, and I'm like, holy crap. I find a short door. A very short door. She's a good half a foot shorter than I am. And it was a time of laughing and joyfulness, and there was one point we're sitting with all of her friends, and one of her friends wasn't too sure about me. So he was basically testing me, and he said something to me in Thai. Well, and I had no idea what he said. And everybody was like quiet, and they looked at me. So I turned to him and I said, yes, but only on Tuesday. And somebody explained it to him, and they just all erupted in laughter. And I won the day through laughter. And I guess that's the running theme of my marriage to May, is because we make each other laugh, and life is funny, and enjoy things. Yeah.
See, hey Anita, how are you?
Hi.
One of our regular listeners who's super supportive, so we love that. I have to say too, you're such a natural storyteller, so I imagine your stories are really wonderful too, because I could listen to you tell these stories all day.
Well, I prefer to think of it as the people in my head won't shut up, so I just started writing down what they were saying.
Yeah, exactly. Make them work for it. So, okay. So when you're first presented with a first, how do you prepare yourself to succeed? Do you go through different scenarios, positive or negative, to ready yourself for contingencies?
I just try to, I try to just go and be myself and see what's going to happen. I don't really have any limits when it comes to that. There are some things that I would rather not do, like I don't want to eat dolphin or something like that. But that's more of because I've seen dolphins dancing with a submarine. Okay, synchronized swimming, that takes more, and there's joy coming out of these things that I don't want to eat that. So
That's
that
fair.
kind of the first, probably not for me.
And are you an introvert or an extrovert? Like, do you feel comfortable going into new situations, or do you have to prep yourself?
I'm kind of a mix. I can get uncomfortable in a crowd, but in a small group or one or two people, I'm the one that won't shut up.
Okay. And what about your wife? Is she introvert or extrovert?
So it depends on how many drinks she's had. She is quiet, kind, generous, and very, very, calm. But a couple of drinks in, and she's on the dance floor. At my daughter's wedding, she danced all night long with the kids because my daughter, of course, has friends with lots of kids. So like 18, 20 kids, and they all just loved her.
Oh.
Wonderful. But yeah, so she's a lot of fun to be around, and she will talk. So I don't know that she's an introvert, really.
Yeah, I'm always like introvert initially, but as soon as I'm comfortable, I'm an extrovert. It's like I just got to get past that. Like once I know you, then I'll chat. But at first, I might stand in the corner until like I get to know you. Yeah. Okay, this is a fun question for me because this is one that I am not. Are you the first to do something first, or are you like me, someone who watches to see what others have done or are doing?
Ooh, first to do something first. Yeah, I'm going to say I'm old enough now that I'll sit back and let somebody else try it first. Like, Elon Musk's rocket going into space. Would I want to be the first to go to Mars? No, I'll wait until there's regular passenger service and they have a track record, So, yeah, I think I'll wait, see how somebody else did it. Like this whole thing about being a novelist and writing books. Fortunately, there's been a few people before me.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've always been that way though. Even when I was younger, I was never the first to do first. I would always watch someone do something, and I love to do things like I skateboard and I roller skate and I do things, but I always wait to see where people fail first. So I don't do that. So if they wipe out on those stairs, well, I'm not going to those stairs. Or if they do this and it doesn't work, so I'm the same way. I think it's actually for me, it's smart because I kind of let them sift through all of it, and then I take more the perfected thing. Let's see. Holly says, let others be the guinea pigs. Absolutely. Yes. Let somebody else do it.
Did you roller skate?
I still roller skate. I love it. My daughter and I try to go on Sundays. I just love it.
Awesome.
It's like flying.
When I was a kid, there was a skating rink in my hometown. It was very small, called the Roller Ranch. And it was so much fun to go. Of course, now as an adult, I'm a little bit off balance.
Yeah. When I first went back to it, my daughter had started doing it, and she's like, "We should go skating." I'm like, "I haven't been skating in years." So we did start the roller rink, and you know what? I took right back to it though. So, and now, like I said, we try to go once a week. So it's a lot of fun. Okay, here's a fun one. What's the first you'd rather forget?
First wife. Oh.
Last time, like my last show, the girl said the same thing, her first marriage. And I said, I concur. So, in all fairness, I think a lot of us have that situation.
I'll be honest. In order to get married the first time, a lot of things happened to lead up to that. Starting in do you remember Saturday Night Live? I don't know how old you are. You're probably too young to remember Saturday Night Live when it was the original cast.
I do. I'm probably older than you realize.
There's an episode where they were doing the very first parody of Star Trek. And one of the audience cutaways was to this man and this young girl with long hair and a great big smile with braces on, and it said, "Father just paid over $100,000 in orthodonture." I was in Minnesota. That was New York Live. Years later, I'm in the Navy. My best friend, Robert Casada, also there's a name, his name is in my books. Robert Casada he and I are at Lynn Haven Mall in Virginia Beach, and I'm going through this gray phase. I want gray, white, or black, and no colors. And the first woman who tried to help me out kept showing me, here's gray and white with a blue stripe. I said, no, blue stripe. Here's a yellow, no. And she got frustrated because she couldn't understand what I wanted. And she went to her assistant manager, and out comes this short blonde with this great big smile and 10 pounds of wedding ring. And she came out and handed me exactly what I wanted, exactly what I needed, things I really liked, went and checked out, flirted a little bit. And as we're going out, my buddy kids me about flirting with her because she's married. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That was my first wife, and he was the best man at my wedding. Oh. There are a couple other things happened along the way, but basically the universe conspired to make me think it was a good idea.
That universe, I tell you,
in order to produce two of the most amazing kids a man could ever have been blessed with.
Exactly. And that's what I say to my children from my first marriage. So I still wouldn't trade it because I got my children out of it. So there's always, and first, there's still like sometimes a blessing, but okay. So this is since you have experience now, you've put out a few books, you've kind of gone through the thing. If you were going to address anyone starting out and on their dreams, so maybe as a writer, what would you tell them their first step should be?
Right. I mean, that's the first step I had to get to. Also, go to the local conventions in whatever genre you're going to write. If it's horror, find horror conventions. If it's science fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and horror generally come together for their conventions. Like RavenCon is based on Edgar Allan Poe, but strong science fiction and fantasy components too. Go to these conventions, meet authors. They're all on panels giving advice. Go get the advice they're giving for free. Talk to them one-on-one, get to know people, and really just start to understand what you're getting yourself into. And hopefully dispel the misconception that you're going to be rich overnight.
Don't worry, we'll tell them very quickly. Just so you know you're not going to get rich. I think that's great advice.
People point to The Martian, they say, man, he made like $400,000 after that book. And it's like, yeah, but that was A, 10 years after he put it out, and B, after they made a movie out of it.
Exactly. And I think that also you have to remember, like, you're pointing out that story because it is the 1 in a million story, right? The rest of us are all out there. We're still just as valued and doing what we can. But yeah, people are like, yeah, but so-and-so. I'm like, yeah, the reason you're bringing them up is because it is such an anomaly. Keep plugging away. Okay, so why are firsts important, and what do they teach us?
Well, you have to do it. There's a first for everything. And if you're afraid to do something for the first time, you're really going to just be stuck. I mean, the first time you go to school, the first time you drive a car, the first time you kiss a girl, the first time you do or kiss a boy, the first time you do anything. I would say life is a series of firsts, and then you get do-overs and practice and you keep going.
I agree. And I think we get better. Well, theoretically, we get better. Hopefully we get better as we go on, theoretically.
I'm a better kisser now.
I hope I am, I don't know. Better than I was at whatever age that was. Yeah, that was pretty terrible. So here's a question that I ask, and I like to really just see what people say on it, because some people say yes and some people say no to this one. Should firsts be erased as we get better or stand as a mark of where we began?
It depends on first what. I mean, my first book is going to be a cornerstone that'll stand forever, but my first kiss was hidden in history. First time riding a bike is forgettable, but some firsts are monumental. The first wife was very important in my life.
Sure.
But the second wife was magnificent. So don't be afraid to try again, I should say. I think it just depends on what the first is, really.
Yeah, I agree.
First pancake goes to the dog.
First pancake goes to the dog.
Nah, put peanut butter and maple syrup on it. You're good.
I usually eat the first because I hate to throw away anything. So I'm always like, I'll just eat it. You guys get the better ones. Oh, it's fine. But I think first can definitely teach us too. So I always say, like, for me personally, I don't want my first erased, because what I do is I can look back at them and look at myself and say, did I learn from it? Did I get better? And that's really my point that I stand on. So, and this kind of goes with that question, and it could be any first. You can make it about your books, but are first an embarrassment or something to be proud of since it was the first, since we were willing to do it, even if it was bad? Is it something we should be proud of?
I'm going to go with my first book. I'm really proud of it. It's got characters in it that I love. I read it again when it came out because I hadn't read it in a couple of years. So when it came out, I actually read it again. And it made me laugh and it made me cry. And I really felt good at the end. And I was ready to read the next book, which is, I think, what you're supposed to feel, you know? So yeah, I'm really proud of it. And despite the one negative review, the other reviews, the other people, the feedback I've gotten is it's really good. Just don't go in expecting military sci-fi. Just saying, it is not military sci-fi.
Okay. Are there any monumental firsts you'd like to tell us about that you haven't already? I mean, like, obviously you've talked about your book. And
Monumental firsts? Yeah, I've had a very interesting life. I mean, my first time going to sea on a submarine was epic. Yeah.
Is it scary?
No, not really. It was like being caught in an office building for 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was great because I'm short, right? And the submarines, the overhead is not that tall. We had a weapons officer who was always walking around with a Band-Aid either right here or right here because he would constantly be hitting his head. It got so bad, as a matter of fact, one day I'm out in the lounge, doing my cleaning duties while people are watching a movie, and the TV is mounted on the wall above me, and I'm underneath there cleaning, and I come back and I hit my head. The whole lounge goes, "Hey, Myers hit his head!" Because it was such a big deal. So that's the first. My first hit in the head.
And first hit in the head. I don't think I remember my first hit in the head. Okay. First can be rough and sometimes embarrassing. However, they also teach us a lot about ourselves. Are there any firsts you often reflect back on with pride and keeps you going when you are struggling?
That's a tough one. What keeps me going when I'm struggling is thinking about my friends. So my first real best friend in high school, Sherry, love you to death. Sherry was my first best friend in high school. She basically, we started working together at the local theater. I asked her out and she says, "I'm not looking for a boyfriend right now, but I could sure use a friend," because she was new in town. And so, I just put the dating thing on hold and said, fine. And we became really good friends. I mean, the kinds of friends who, if you got a cigarette from them, that there was a 1 in 6 chance it was going to blow up. I mean, that it was fun. We went out, we drank, we did things together. And just the kind of friends that you can say anything and do anything. And when eventually she came out to me and said the reason she wasn't looking for a boyfriend was because she's looking for a girlfriend. Yeah. It didn't matter. It didn't change a thing because we had a friendship, and that friendship today, I could show up on her doorstep and have a place to sleep, and she could do the same here. And she knows that, and she's in Minnesota, I'm in Virginia. So it's a lot of distance, but we're still here. We're still, we're still friends. People like her in my life. And, one of my friends, when I was in the Navy, he and I had gone to school together, and his first wife Um, we lived across the street from each other at about the point where all of our marriages were falling apart. She and I remain friends, and she's another very dear friend. So I think about people to get me through things.
I love that. That's really awesome. Okay, so we're going to switch gears and do the randomizer. And this is where it's going to be, you'll see in a second, it's going to be a wheel that spins and it'll land on a specific first. And you'll get to tell me about it. And I usually put myself on the hot seat as well and share about my first too. So let me make sure I can present this. This is new to me. So I want to make sure I can do this. Share my screen and share. Do you see my randomizer?
I do.
All right, well, let's spin it and see what it comes up with. Ooh, first scare. So what is your first scare?
First scare. When I was young, one night I snuck out of my bedroom, snuck down the stairs and hid behind the couch, looking over as whoever was on the couch, and I don't know who it was at the moment, was watching this movie about a woman who was buried alive. It was creepy. It was nasty. And I had nightmares for years after that about being buried alive.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was my first really big scare.
Okay. Yeah, mine, honestly, I remember being very little and my mother took us to like a street fair or something. And I was little, maybe like 3 or 4, and a clown came up, but it was a clown with like a giant plastic head. And I was petrified. And I hid behind my mother screaming, and she kept trying to force me out front. She's like, it's just a clown, you know, how mothers are. Anyway, kept trying to get me out there. And I still to this day can picture that big clown head because it was so terrifying to me. So that was my first scare. Okay, let's go back to the randomizer and see what it says. All right. Ooh, first crime.
Ooh.
And of course, it says crime in the, you know, quotations because it doesn't, it could be stealing candy. Uh-oh.
Yeah. I was not a totally good juvenile. I do have a record that has been sealed because I am now an adult. A friend of mine and I got it in our heads to go and steal some lumber from a local construction site. That escalated when my friend noticed that the garage was full of stuff.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So it ended up probation, fine, restitution. And, you know, it wasn't terribly serious because they got all their stuff back except for one sock. I still remember going to the door, handing them the check, and having the old man ask me where that sock went. Like I'm really, you know, but I got to know the people too, and realized that my actions had a severe impact on them. And, you know, the emotional impact. So it was a lesson learned. But yeah, that was a crime.
Yeah, mine's a little more innocent. I mean, for the time I was in preschool and I wanted candy at the store, my mother said no, and I didn't want to take no for an answer, so I took a pack of M&Ms and a pack of Starburst and I rolled it in the hem of my skirt, of my dress, and I held it the whole way to preschool, got all the way to preschool, and when I got out, I kind of forgot about it, and it dropped out onto the ground, and I was to my mom, "Look what I found," and she knew, of course. So, but I did not find it. However, she only found the M&Ms. I still had the Starburst, and I did proceed to eat those at school. So I didn't feel too guilty about it, apparently.
No.
All right, we'll do one more of the randomizer. Let's see. Let's spin this. Ooh, I like this one. First best friend.
Ah, uh, I can't remember what grade it was, first or second or third, somewhere in there. We had just moved into a new house, and I decided I was going to go find somebody to play with in this new neighborhood. And so I knocked on a few doors, and one of the doors, this lady came to the door, and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for kids to play with about my age." And she's like, "Oh, sure, Mike." And she called her kid over, Mike Bajarski. "Hey, Mike, if you're out there." Uh, and we just fell in as two cohorts. And we were best friends all through elementary and high school, and even up through senior high. Kind of fell away when I went to the Navy, and he went a different direction. Not We weren't the kind of friends that stayed in touch, I guess. Not like Sherry or Dee or Anna even. But yeah, he was my first best friend.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And there is a place in Precipice that they go to called Bujo's Bash Can, which Bujo is the nickname for Mike Bajarski. Just saying.
Okay. That's cool. So you actually took him and worked him into your story. I love that, because that's awesome. My first best friend, same thing. I was probably kindergarten, first grade, and 2 doors down, we moved into a house in Wilmington, North Carolina. My stepfather got a job with IBM, and so we moved there. And there was this little girl named Janine Stroman. And I think we lived there 4 years. For the 4 years we lived there, I saw her probably every day. And then my parents divorced, and we moved away. And, to this day, sometimes I'll type her name in just to see, if I can find her, and I never do. But it's kind of neat, having that. I've never worked her into a story, but I like that idea. So, I think our first best friends still matter to us, even if we don't communicate with them years later, because they were so pivotal in our childhood. So that's really awesome.
One of my best friends from the Navy, I've already mentioned him, Robert Casada.
Mm-hmm.
He actually lives in Wilmington now.
I love Wilmington. It is such a beautiful city, and I'd like to go back for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes kind of all my questions. I'm putting you in the hot seat. So I would love for you to let everybody know where they can find you, where they can purchase your books, and if you have anything coming up, whether it's events or any other stories coming on, go ahead and share that.
Okay. If you're interested in my books, they're on Amazon.com. Just look for Rise of the Automated Empire. There's 4 books in the series, and the series is complete. I will be at RavenCon near the end of this month, and then I'm going to be at Con Carolinas and Congregate this year. The dates are on my website at automatedempire.com.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and it's Dennis M. Myers. That is his author name. We appreciate you sharing your stories. You were quite delightful to have on. And I wish you luck at your cons. I just started going to cons last year and have really been enjoying kind of meeting other authors and having that experience. So I wish you luck.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis. And it was a pleasure talking to you.